So today I'm going to be putting flares in the where the two back window cutouts are. Now I put my windows in on the driver and passenger side a couple of days ago, and my flares just came back from the paint shop and they look amazing. I had my flares painted at Caliber Collision. I've used them before for some body work on my cars, and they do a great job. Now I got quotes from about 5 different places, and the quotes range anywhere from $450 to paint both up to as high as $1,200. Caliber did it for about $550, and because I had used them before, I was really comfortable with their work, and so I went with that. Took them about 3 days, and they turned out fantastic. Probably the most intimidating part of this whole thing is cutting big holes in the side of your van. A lot of people will hire this out because they're just afraid to do it. I'm here to tell you that it never gets less scary, but it really is pretty straightforward and almost impossible to mess up. And I'm going to show you some tips. In the several windows that I've installed, I've learned a couple of things that really helped me compared to my first time. My first time, it was kind of a mess, and I really had to do a lot of grinding and filing to clean everything up. And I found a way to cut that just comes out really nice, just a little bit of touch up with a file, and you're good to go. So there's a few tools you're going to want to have to cut the holes. I recommend a Sharpie and outlining right along the inside, and then continue that line across on these straight edges. Draw it all the way around, because when you're filing and there's the metal dust flying and everything, it gets a little bit hard to see exactly the line where you're cutting. So drawing a good line with a Sharpie is going to really help. The next thing is it's really nice to have one of these bits for your drill. It'll drill a hole in metal, but then it steps up and you can make it whatever size you want. And you just want to make it big enough for your blade of your saw to go through. Now, as far as cutting goes, I've tried 3 different methods. I've watched everything on YouTube about installing windows and flares, and there were a few different recommendations. What most people do is they use a jigsaw and they cut from the outside. Well, the van has this nice stamp out, cut out, that all you need to do is follow along that. But the tricky part is that for most time you can't get a jigsaw in here because there's not enough room, and so you have to do it from the outside. So what that means is you got to go around with a punch or something and mark all the way around, and then draw it on the outside and then follow that line. And sometimes as jigsaw blades, as they're cutting, they'll deflect a little bit, and it's really easy to get off. And when I did my first one, I cut into this, and then I was up, and it was really not very straight, even though I was following the line. You know, you get into these support pieces, and it's thicker metal, and the blade will start to bend or deflect, and so it's hard to do a straight line. So then I watched a video by a professional installer, and they used a handheld reciprocating saw, kind of like a Sawzall. And they cut from the inside, and they just followed this line around. Well, I have a Sawzall, so I decided to give that a try. And Sawzalls are really made for just cutting through things that are in the way. You know, when you're doing demolition on a house or something, you just want to cut through nails and 2x4s to get at stuff. And they're not super accurate. So what I found when I tried to use the Sawzall, again, with the vibration, the dust, and the thing moving, it was really hard to follow this stamp out. So those 2 ways, the Sawzall I didn't find worked well at all. The jigsaw from the outside worked okay, but it was hard to follow the line and make a really clean cut. So what I found is that this jigsaw that I have, and I love this jigsaw, it's a Milwaukee. I think with the battery, it's about $150. You can buy it without the battery if you already have the M12 batteries. I think you can buy just the tool for around $100, maybe even a little less. The nice thing about this is, one, it's cordless. Another one is a lot of them they have what they call the iron shape, where like a iron for ironing clothes, where they come around and you hold the handle, and they're kind of big and bulky. This one I really like. It has a hard plastic thing right here that really protects anything you're cutting so it doesn't scratch. But what I found is that it's the perfect width to go right along this edge. I'm gonna pull the blade out here for a second so you can kind of see. But if I set it right on this edge, the blade is perfect right along this edge right here. And so you can just basically follow this line and get a perfect cut. And I did this on my front windows and it worked great. Most saw blades that people use are these short ones. It's actually, if you measure the whole thing, it's 3.5 inches. The cutting part is about 2 3/4 inches. What you want to do is you want to use these longer blades. And this blade, the cutting part is 4.5 inches. So there's the difference in size in the two blades. And the reason that you want to use this long one when you're cutting from the inside is going around the corners. Because what happens is as you're following this edge, you can't follow it around the corners because this plate won't make the turn. But if you have a longer blade in, you can actually lift the back out and cut it like this and make a perfect cut around those corners. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. But I recommend these Bosch blades. Diablo makes a good jigsaw blade as well. But these Bosch that are made for metal are really good. The other things you're going to want to have is it's pretty loud, so you want to have some hearing protection and eye protection. So let's get into it. So I found that for me, being right-handed, it's easiest to cut this way and this way rather than from the top and cutting this. It's harder for me to make the turns. So I'm going to just drill a hole right here and then I'm going to follow the lines around. Now you don't have to drill it right on the edge. I recommend drilling it up a little bit, and then as you start cutting, you just kind of run your saw down and into here. So just make it big enough for your saw blade to go through. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start cutting down to this edge and then go around. Once you get it down so that the edge of this is resting on this ledge, just go nice and slow. If you try and go too fast, especially as you're cutting through these support pieces, the saw blade will deflect and you won't get a straight line. So you want to cut right there until you hit the curve. Then once you hit that curve is where you're going to lift the back so that you can make that turn. Okay, I'm just going to get down here and follow this line. So there it is. You can see that's really nice corner. I'll clean that up a little bit with a file. So you want to stop and then go from the other side. And then when you get to the point you have a little bit connected, then you're just going to hold the bottom and finish that cut and it'll come right out. So then once you've cut it the whole way around and you just have that little bit left at the top, I just pull this together. If you have somebody to help you, that's even better. You can definitely do this. So I'm just gonna hold it, make sure you have gloves on, and then I'm gonna cut this last little bit. And there we go. So you can see we're able to do the corners really nice. Now I do recommend that you change the saw blade for each window. It's good just to have a fresh blade, helps it cut easier. So I've drilled my little starting hole, and I'm just going to do the same thing here. Next, I take down all of the edges with a file and just make sure everything's smooth and there's no burrs or sharp pieces of metal sticking up. So I've got it all filed. Now I'm just going to hit it with some paint. I use the Rust-Oleum paint and primer in one. Before you paint, you just want to prep everything by cleaning it first of all with rubbing alcohol. You want to clean the side of the van because you're going to be applying tape and you want it to stick really well. And you also want to make sure that the paint is clean where you're going to be applying the adhesive sealant. Like I said, I use the Rust-Oleum 2-in-1, and I use these little daubers. They're wool daubers, and I'll put a link to those in the description. I found that those are the best way to apply the paint because the metal, even though you filed it, it's a little bit rough, and I've tried using foam brushes and Q-tips and different things, and it just gets caught up in the metal. So I just spray a little bit of paint in a cup and just go around all the edges and make sure they're covered with the paint. And it's okay if you go a little bit on the front side of the van because that's all going to be covered by the flare. Now, before you apply the sealant and put the flares on, you want to just scuff up the paint with some 220 grit sandpaper. You don't need to scrape it down to the bare metal. You just want to scuff it up, and that's going to allow that adhesive to make a mechanical bond between the flares and the side of the van. Once you're finished scuffing up the paint, you just want to clean it. You can use mineral spirits or alcohol. I use the mineral spirits because it doesn't harm the paint, it cleans it really well, and it dries quickly. You also want to just scuff up the back side of the flares, and then after you've done that, just clean that also with rubbing alcohol or mineral spirits. Before you hang the flares, you just want to prep the area by putting tape up above and kind of folding it up out of the way so that when you put the flares up, it's really easy just to pull that tape down and hang it. This is a special tape called 3M Automotive Refinishing Tape, and I'll put a link to it in the description, but it's the tape that Flare Space recommends that you use. It's a little bit stronger than painter's tape and also doesn't have the stretch in it, so it hangs it and holds it in place really well. Now I'm ready to apply the adhesive. They send this along with the flares. They send enough to do both flares and also do the inside. And it says you should use all of it, so hopefully I do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off about, so that I've got about maybe a 3/8 inch hole at a little bit of an angle. And then on this top edge, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little V notch, just right in the top. So you see that little V? That's going to leave a ridge along the top so that I'm sure I have plenty of adhesive. Okay, so I just bought this handy dandy gun. This thing is really cool. It's an electric caulk gun, and it just uses the batteries. I have a lot of rigid tools, and so I already have a lot of batteries. I just bought the tool only without the batteries. It was like $75. And you know, when you're doing a van, you deal with a lot of really thick caulks. And so I think this is going to be really nice. It has adjustable speed. I'm going to start on the really low speed and see how it goes, and then I may speed it up. Now, you want to make sure that that notch is on top. So as you're laying down the bead, it's leaving a little ridge on the top. And as you do it, you want to caulk right on the inside edge so that when this squeezes, if there's any excess, it squeezes to the inside and not the outside, because the inside is going to be all covered, but the outside is going to be exposed. And so if it oozes out on the side, there's gonna be a lot of cleanup we're gonna have to do, and that's doable, but we wanna try to avoid that as much as possible. So I'm gonna just start, and so this is the top. When you're doing like a window or something like this, you wanna not try not to have any seams across the top. You wanna have an even bead. You don't wanna start and stop. What I found when I was doing my windows with a hand caulk gun is it kind of leaves fat, skinny, and so I'm hoping this one leaves a really nice, clean bead. So let's see. So I'm gonna start along the side and the bottom. This is the front edge. I actually wanna start, the front edge and the top are the most important because obviously the wind is coming this way and water's coming down this way. So I'm gonna start down here and then just go around. My battery's dead. All right, so I found a freshly charged battery. There we go. All right, right on the inside edge. And that's actually a little fast. That's on a 3. I'm gonna slow it down so that. All right, perfect. So now if there's any place that it's a little thin or a little too much or a little close to the edge, you wanna go around and clean that up with a knife. This all looks pretty good. I don't see any problem areas. I've got a little bit close to the edge right here, so I'm gonna just clean this up so that it hopefully doesn't ooze out. Okay, you gotta go up higher with yours. It fits into that corner and then down just a little bit. Yeah, I think that's good there. We found that it worked best to kind of eyeball and place it into the upper right corner first, matching the curve of the stamp out of the van, and then go ahead and place the front and then the bottom. And that seemed to work really well. You can adjust it, you know, a 1/4 inch or so, but you don't want to have to move it around or you're going to have the adhesive oozing out all over the place. It's pretty hard to get it up there without getting any of the adhesive on the side of the van or the flare, but it cleans up really, really easily with isopropyl alcohol as long as it's wet. Within a few minutes of placing the flare, you just want to go around and make sure that everything's lined up right, that it follows the curvature of the stamps, that everything's evenly spaced. And you can move things around and just kind of lift off the tape and then reapply it to get it exactly where you want it. Then it's onto the other side, and we did it the same way. We kind of put that upper back corner in first and made sure that was lined up with the curve, and then get the rest of the top, and then go ahead and get the bottom in place. They recommend that you leave a little small gap, like a 1/16 of an inch above the rail of the door. Don't have it resting on the door. So you kind of want to make sure there's just a little gap and then tape it in place. You want to go around and just push on all the edges and make sure that caulk is, you know, squished in as much as you can. Don't push in the middle of the flare because it is fiberglass, it could crack, but just push on all the edges and then finish taping it down. All in all, I'm really happy with the way these flares turned out. They add about 5 inches of width to the sleeping area, and I think they look great. They look real aggressive, and I would say they're about the same level of difficulty to install as windows. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. We'll see you in the next video.